Yeah, my name's Kyle Rowley. Yeah, and I'm the game director
Okay.
of Alan Wake 2, co-directing with Sam and Lake.
Okay. Yes, definitely.
My name is Melody Maloney. I am principal narrative designer on Alan Wake 2.
Tremendous. Okay, and I'm Raymond Flotat here from mxdwn.com. At the last moment, the last thing of Summer Game Fest, everyone gets to go home, even some people who come quite a ways away for here. And we're here talking with Kyle and Molly from Molly, right? They're right, good. Kyle and Molly from Alan Wake 2, which is an incredible new sequel that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. Now, I had a chance to get into this a little bit earlier and to be able to see some of it, right? I'm sure there is oceans of material in this game in terms of everything that it is, and there's probably a whole hell of a lot that can't be gone into in terms of story and plot. But what was there, I think the first thing I kind of want to touch on is that it's just visually gorgeous. Now, I was saying to one of the publicists on the way in, he's like, what'd you think of it? I was like, it looks incredible. I don't know if my anxiety can cope with it. That was my first immediate thought, was like, this looks nail-biting.
Yeah.
This looks intense.
I think that's kind of both a good thing and a bad thing in a way. Like, at least for our side, we kind of want to create a horror experience.
Sure.
But obviously, if you so scary that you can't play, one of the things we're actually doing to kind of like help with that is the fact that we do have these this duality in the game.
Sure.
These two hero characters. Saga Anderson, the FBI profiler, comes to the small town of Bright Falls. She's complete newcomer to this whole setup, this whole scenario, knows nothing about what happened in Alan Wake 1. So she's one of our characters, and she's obviously playable in Pacific Northwest. And then we have the Alan experience in the Dark Place. And, when you're talking about it's quite anxiety inducing. One of the things that we allow the player to do is actually switch to the other character. So if you feel like, this is a bit too much, you could then be like, I'm going to go see what Saga's doing in the daytime, in the Pacific Northwest, and talking to quirky characters. So,
Is it that hot swappable?
It's,
After a certain point, there are... So basically, you just came from the demo, right?
It was about an hour ago, but yeah.
So you saw in the break room. After a certain point, you will unlock Alan, and then in I believe it's the break rooms, you will be able to swap between the two.
Got it. Now, even as far as Saga walking around the forest, the ambience, the rain, the wind coming up on the lake, I mean, even that was this whole own brand of like, okay, monsters are coming, horrible things are coming right around the corner. And I guess that, there's certainly a big investigative detective element, which is, kind of fascinating in its own respect. And there is, I guess the question is how much of it has that kind of like suspenseful kind of horror vibe to it?
I think that we are looking for a horror experience. I think if we think back to Alan Wake 1, right? Alan Wake 1, it was like a horror story. It did have creepy forests, etc. But one of the things that I think resonated with a lot of players is the fact that it also had a bit of levity. It had like daytime sequences inside the small town of Bright Falls. We had like quirky characters you could talk to. So for us, we're kind of looking to find a balance between, intense horror, which is kind of what we do want to have, but we don't want to have it like all the time. So we're trying to balance that with like some daytime scenes where like, as a player, you get a bit of comedy. So like people like with the over top characters before we then dive back in. So those horror moments are more, as I'd say, extreme when you're kind of not exposed to them all the time. So it's kind of like quite a conscious thing on our side.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just elaborated on that to say like you can only sustain being frightened for so long before you're going to put the controller down and walk away.
Right.
So the levity is really important as a balance to that. Like you can't be truly scared if you also don't have pauses and breaks from being scared. So yeah, that's definitely a core component of the game.
I wouldn't ask you for any guarantees, but roughly half and half.
Of
Levity and things that are not scary to scary.
It's still a horror game.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily half and half, but
Okay,
we're obviously still, and there's different levels of horror, right? There's like extreme, like we want you to be really scared versus like this is a bit uneasy. I don't necessarily feel like I'm 100% safe, but I'm not like biting my fingernails of anxiety the whole time.
Got it.
When we talk about like a psychological horror game, the Remedy version of that, we're storytelling. We have a lot of focus on storytelling. This is a storytelling words are hard.
Indeed, after
this is
this
a
week.
narrative-driven experience. So you know, it's like one of the core things about that is interesting characters, and how do we tell a story through the environments, and through the combat and things like that. So I would also say that when it comes to the balance, and 50-50 was your question.
Yeah, just
It's not, but it is. It's about providing different forms of respite. So it's like not necessarily comedy. I mean, I wouldn't describe this as a comedy game.
Of course not. But, you know, so here's the thing. Like, I go super far back, and before to the time where my magazine was Movies and Games and Television, we were just a music magazine. And one of the first times that I went to E3, for whatever reason that I was able to go back in its glory days, I stumbled upon a room. I walked into that room. It was the first day of E3. And as I came into that room, the person who was there, I'm totally forgetting who it was at this point, basically introduced it as, this is the first time we're ever going to show this game we've been working on for years called Alan Wake.
Okay.
So it was like, I guess, by a point of historical note, that was the first moment a human being outside of the studio got to see it. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was a lot of years in the build up to that. That didn't happen in a month, right? Games don't generally happen in a month, even in the easiest of times. A lot of time has gone into this one. Now, in imagining this new world, which is, of course, there's new generation technology, there's certainly a higher depth of field, there's just common edge, and also much higher grade televisions as far as everything is concerned. What was the biggest challenge in trying to, I don't want to say that there's any impetus to try to make this on par with modern standards, but I mean, it's beautiful and gorgeous and vibrant in a way that I wasn't anticipating. I knew it would be great. I knew it would be scary. I knew it would be interesting. I knew it would be nuanced. But I sat there looking at it, and I was like, this is as good as anything I've seen. How much time did that take to render to that level of detail?
Well, you know, we have our own Northlight engine, which is kind of an in-house engine. Sure. We have like an amazing engine team. And I think that when we were thinking about the concept for this game, we were obviously like on a technology level looking at what's coming from the new generation of consoles, and then what does our engine currently do very well, and like what could we improve on. So one of the things that we improved on is like just rendering technology in general. We have a new renderer for the engine. Sure. We were looking at like how can we improve the underlying core architecture to allow us to utilize the high speeds of the SSDs, sure, so we can grab data from the game much faster. So we can do things like, you know, insta press of the button, you can switch to the mind place, which is kind of Saga's kind of internal head. You know, so those were kind of important from a technology perspective. And then, you know, on top of that, we knew that we wanted to do the Pacific Northwest, and one of the things we said very early on was like, we want to create the most beautiful looking forests in a game like ever. That was like a statement we were like saying, like from an art direction perspective, that was very important for us because we spend a lot of time in kind of those primordial forests, and a lot of the atmosphere comes from that kind of, you know, the motion in the wind, the foliage moving. So we built a lot of new technology on our engine that allows us to do like foliage. We built a new terrain editor that allows us to create kind of like, because we've done a lot of games recently which are kind of all internal spaces. Like Control was kind of internal, Quantum Break was mainly based on interior locations. So we wanted to build a lot of technology that allow us to kind of build those kind of visuals that you saw. And the art team and the tech team at Remedy are wizards, and they've done a great job.
Did you want to say something? I want to make sure.
Well, I would also say the part I was thinking of was the overlapping of the worlds. You know, it's like when we talk about the rendering technology, it's also the ability, I mean, you probably saw in the overlap segments, but it's like this beautiful layering of like different levels. That's not possible with previous gen technology. So as to what Kyle is speaking to, we put a lot of work into the engine to allow it to do that, but it's because there was a vision for what we wanted this surreal like dreamscape to feel like. And when you're making a more psychologically horror driven experience, it's like it's the culmination of visuals meets audio meets like all these little components that make that experience.
So, you know, a bizarre comparison, just to go in an odd direction, like The Wizard of Oz, right? Ancient technology, right, when that movie's made, but there's still like a sense of the far beyond. And even for a super old movie on super prosaic effects, you feel like that horizon is endless, right? Something about the wizardry of that time is incredible. Within this one, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like you could theoretically go in any direction. It felt like there was an unlimited amount of space to traverse, but I also am guessing it's a little bit more on a rail than all of that. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but you had me fooled if it's not. Like, I honestly was like, I felt like I could just pick a random ass direction and go for ages.
Well, to be clear, it's not an open world game,
course.
so your suspicions are correct.
Yes.
But I can tell you that a ton of work has gone into the hub spaces. Like, we've learned a lot from our previous game Control about like what we wanted to offer, but because this is a narrative focused experience, we wanted spaces that kind of pull you through them and give you a lot of options in terms of what paths you take. What I will say is, so Cauldron Lake is one of 3 hubs that are in the game, and those hubs evolve and change over the course of play, and you can return to them. So things that you see, paths that may be blocked might be unblocked. There are new areas to discover and explore. Exploration was a core pillar of this project. So while it's not open world, as you say, I'm really glad that it felt that way to you, because that represents a lot of work by the team.
I mean, I'm not just saying that to make you happy. I promise. Like, I was there like, I bet there's only a X number of dimensions of choices within the path that we're on here, but I seriously believe there's an endless swamp going in that direction. I bought it for what it's worth.
I mean, in that instance, actually, like it does. That's one of the areas where we actually make the kind of like the world larger over time. So yeah, we have to explore more.
Okay. And then as a final question here, just to wrap up, effectively for people who've been waiting a long time, because Alan Wake has its own core of fans that have been there very loyal for a very long time, what is the thing as far as what they're going to get in this experience versus the first one, beyond any modern enhancements in technology, but in terms of is this bigger story, darker, more nuanced story?
I think that compared to the first one, we've put a lot more emphasis on making sure that the story, the horror story we're trying to tell, and the gameplay that you'll kind of experience that story through are much more better aligned. You know, they're more cohesive experience. The first game was a horror story. It was slow paced, but the kind of action gameplay kind of like contradicted it in a way. It kind of felt a bit disjointed. So we really wanted to try and make sure that we were creating a game experience that allowed the story to be told through the gameplay as much as possible. That's why we introduced concepts like, you know, the mind place and the case board, because those are concepts which make sense from the idea of being an FBI profiler, but they're also game mechanics that the player actively interacts with, and we tell the story through those mechanics. So we're much more trying to kind of create a kind of like wider experience where, you know, you have more options and things to do, but with the gameplay and the story are kind of much more cohesive. You want something?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the biggest game that Remedy has ever made. So there's more there than we've ever done before. But also, like, our core theme on this game is duality. You've got 2 playable protagonists. You've got 2 worlds. You've got these 2 stories that echo and mirror each other in ways that I'm not even sure the characters themselves understand. There is just a lot of content in this game.
It looks like it.
Yeah, it feels like it when we're building it. So I think that's what my elaboration would be.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate all your time. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to play it. If my own anxiety threshold lets me. I hope to. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as confident as you are myself, but thank you, and we can't wait to see it, play it, and experience it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
No, thank you for your patience with all of this.
No worries.